Good evening. I'd like to begin with a piece from this book, The Esoteric Dao De Jing by Hua Qing Ni, that I shared some of stuff about Lao Tzu with you last week. And in this part of his book, he's talking about translating the chapter 57, especially the first two lines, where in the sort of received text, the way most people translate it, the way I have it in my book, the first two lines are: use justice to rule a country, use cunning when conducting war. So, here he says, the focus of Lao Tzu's work, and my work, meaning his, is to live a life of integral truth. With this goal in mind, let us examine a few sections of the Dao De Jing in greater detail. In chapter 57, Lao Tzu says, use an upright approach in governing people. Use a surprising approach to command troops in war. And then this is the translation he uses in this Esoteric Dao De Jing book. Use upright measures to govern your body's kingdom. Use no pre-decided measure to handle a specific life situation. Use no cunning to deal with the world. So he's opening it up a little bit into more of a practice. So he says the word, one of these characters means upright, and the other character means surprising, unthinkable, unusual, or unpredictable. Thus, the esoteric meaning of the first sentence is to use an upright approach in governing your own life and in dealing with people in general situations. In short, be a trustworthy and honest person. Normally, commanding troops in war is not something that happens in daily life. It is not pleasant to make one's own home or workplace a battlefield, so it is best to use the principle outlined in the second sentence by applying it to living creatively and artistically. Thus, using a surprising or uncommon approach to handle difficult life situations is considered an art, which is highly respected in spiritual traditions. It can also be applied to ordinary situations in daily life and to the arts in general. Art can bring joy into your life. There's a kind of skill in the ability to use surprise positively. This can also be called, quote, reading the level of the unusual, inconceivable, or uncommon. It can be applied to poetry, fine arts, calligraphy, gentle movements such as Tai Chi exercise, designing gardens, arranging flowers or rocks, and arranging furniture in a house, etc. In the expression of artistic interest, an unusual, uncommon approach can bring out the beauty of the simplicity of life. Unusualness, and uncommonness is above the general level of art and is a greater expression of creative energy. So, I feel he's talking here about becoming an artist of your own life. Like Jack Kerouac wrote about being director of your own movie and doing it in maybe an unusual and uncommon and surprising way. Why do we apply the element of surprise or uncommonness? The typical approach to problem solving or production is to do something too much. Overdoing things may be an improper triviality, but it can also lead to problems. Doing much is like that principle of wu-wei, not overdoing, not overextending, right? This is where most people live their life in yo-wei, Y-O-U way, or the opposite of wu-wei, which is what he's talking about here. For example, when women put cosmetics on their faces, if they put on too much, they damage their natural beauty or harm their skin. This then becomes a problem. In preparing a meal, too many spices, salts, or seasonings, or cooking for too long will spoil the essence of food or cause digestive or health problems. Overeating also causes problems. Again, overdoing can become a problem because we're not following. That's what I consider the most important principle in all of Taoism, of wu-wei. In too much money, or I should say too much money, if not correctly managed, spoils one's life. With improper use of money, it is hard for a person to enjoy the essence of life. Using too much force in martial arts damages gracefulness. And of course, this could be using too much force in our daily life, in our own life. Damages the gracefulness of our life. This makes the personality impulsive and aggressive, which can become a problem for other people and ultimately for themselves. In writing poetry, too many words and not enough meaning make for an uninteresting poem. This is perhaps a trivial example, but true nonetheless. I just need to close the door of my office, which I neglected to do earlier. In giving a speech or communicating with someone, too many words can cause the main point to be missed. This can lead to difficulty. And of course, this is why Lao Tzu wrote so few words in his book. In creating fine art, if you choose to express the spirit behind the picture, the less complicated the picture, the more effective the achievement. Like Japanese and Chinese traditional art, where they're leaving a lot of space. They're sometimes using space to imply something that's not there, but gives us the feeling of something that could be there but is not, but energetically and artistically is there. I hope that makes sense. In a drama, too much love or hatred brings about an artistic effect, like Shakespeare, but in everyday life, too much love spoils love, or anything carried to an extreme. And too much hatred brings about a tense, nervous life. In leadership, even if you are powerful as an ancient tyrant or a dictator, and you disciplined others too much, it would make people hate you. It is the same in a family. Tyrants and dictators may have thought of doing good for people at one time, but people's experience of what the leader did for them was different. People who believe in aggressive religions, occultism, communism, or any ism tend to overdo it by pushing their beliefs onto others. There is no natural harmony in an artless life. And of course, we see that with a lot of religions, especially people who become fundamentalist in their religion. There is no natural harmony in an artless life. In everyday life, be simple, earnest, honest, and sincere, which expresses the integral way and the spirit of life. Integral way is what Huachini calls Tao. When you do art, you might enjoy the use of the simple way to express the essence of your great enjoyment and taste. If you are skillful at catching the essence in living life and doing art, you can see that Tao is everywhere and everything in your life. If you cannot catch the essence and artistic expression, too much color or too many words will not do it. Overdoing things seldom brings the correct result. Overdoing things is how foolish people and the foolish world block the flow of natural harmony between themselves, or even, we could say, even within themselves. For example, when leaders of a religion overdo it, the religion invades all aspects of their lives. Being overly religious will tighten up a person's life and stiffen the natural and organic life. And he's talking about what I was just saying in a fundamentalist religious aspect. Here I'm not talking about spiritual learning. I'm talking about religious learning. There is a difference. If you ask me, what is the cause of all the problems in the world, I will answer you quite simply that the cause is leaders and people who overdo things. This is the important teaching of Lao Tzu. Do not overdo anything. Keep to this principle of Wu Wei in every aspect of your life, really. What is the problem in your personal life, he asks. If you feel miserable, you might look at the possibility that you are overusing your emotional force and trying to make things happen as you desire. That is a problem. In life, some things will happen as you wish, others will happen differently than you wish, and some things will not happen at all. However, no matter whether things work out exactly as you planned, there's always a place where your life can continue with pure joy, laughter, and the smile of understanding. That is the goal and true achievement. So in chapter 56, Lao Tzu says, a person of truth is someone who could not be made too close to be in your favor. Also, he is someone who could not be made to go away from your conscience. So let me just see what 56 is in my book, or how most people translate that book, that line. Well, actually, I'm not really sure. A person of truth. Well, the way it's often translated, the way in my book I use the one who knows does not speak, and the one who speaks does not know. So Esther and I will talk about that in a moment. Or simply, one cannot be made close, one cannot be made far. This is my new translation. No one can get too close to you, and no one can get too far from you. One cannot be made too close. If you are too close to one person or a group of people, you lose your objectivity and become partial to them. So he's seeing them that could create problems. That does not mean that you reject people in your life. That means that you can be close to people, but you maintain enough space so that you can still retain your individuality and your balance. Remember, he talks a lot in some of his other books about being emotionally and spiritually independent. When we give away our independence, when we give away our chi, when we give away our heart, when we give away our energy to someone in a very non-wu way, and they actually become controlling us, or giving our energy, our strength back over to a guru, even a spiritual master, in an unhealthy way, that causes problems. This is actually helpful to other people too, because it gives them enough space to keep their balance too. One could not be made too far. If you keep yourself too far from people, how can you help them? So later in chapter 56, or beginning actually in chapter 56, Lao Tzu says, the one who knows does not speak, the one who speaks does not know. Very famous 2 lines there. Or simply, the knower does not talk, the talker does not know. And then he says, this is my new translation. The wise one who knows the subtle truth does not talk, but just wants to do things and be what one is. The one who talks about the subtle truth really does not know it. So when Lao Tzu talks about speaking, he means speaking about the truth. Most people do not know that religions do not teach truth necessarily. When people in China were taught about many gods and many Buddhas, they became religious. Some of them cut off their fingers as offerings to be burned as incense. That's a thing in Buddhism. Many Buddhists made religious pilgrimages covering thousands of miles to reach a temple or a mountaintop to seek blessings. These 2 examples show how people are misguided by the false, quote, truth. Most people give up the normalcy of life after they become religious. The natural virtue of people started to decline because of the false teachings. This situation of society forced a truly achieved one to respond. So he's talking here about religion as a controlling force in people's life. A lot about religion, the way they were founded. Well, a lot of times religions were founded from the teachings of someone like Sakyamuni, the Buddha, or Lao Tzu, or Jesus of Nazareth, whose goal was not to start a religion and try to control people's everyday life, like a lot of religions do. They were often created as a way of controlling people, as a political force. And of course, we all know what happens when people start using it in a fundamentalist way and start trying to control other people, and even causing many wars. which seems like kind of a crazy thing to do about religion, which should be about spiritual liberation, not spiritual control. But even many religions, which were formed of an ancient teacher's teachings, were created and became something quite different than the way they taught. So I'd like to share another little piece by a fellow that I'm a big fan of on Facebook, and I didn't get his name, Khaled, I'm not quite sure how to say his name. So I'll just share a little bit from this post he went called Crazy Wisdom, Ancient Hippies, and Taoist Virtue. So he's going to talk about Da here. Introduction. What is Taoist virtue? The word virtue in Taoism is usually translated from the Chinese character, or Da, most famously appearing in the title of the Dao De Jing. Yes, Taoist virtue differs profoundly from the moralistic sense of virtue common in many ethical traditions, including Christianity, Islam, and especially Confucianism. In Taoism, virtue is not primarily about conforming to prescribed moral rules or what a religion would force us into. Rather, it is about the natural expression of one's authentic nature in harmony with the Tao. The Dao De Jing expresses this paradox memorably in these two lines from chapter 38. Higher virtue is not virtuous, therefore it has virtue. Lower virtue never forgets virtue, therefore it has no virtue. The meaning is subtle. Genuine virtue does not arise from conscious moral effort or from the desire to appear virtuous. Instead, it emerges spontaneously when a person lives naturally and authentically, which is what Taoism is about, right? When virtue becomes something one tries to display or cultivate self-consciously, it degenerates into artificial morality. And again, that's that idea this week about talking about the difference between philosophy and religion. You know, we have these two terms in Taoism called Dao Jia and Dao Zhou. And Dao Jia is usually thought of as sometimes translated as philosophical Taoism or classical Taoism or Huang Lao Taoism or Taoism of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, or Dao Zhou describes the religious form of Taoism, which of course a lot of it is based on Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, but also based on a lot of other things, like a lot of aspects of Buddhism. And there are many, many, many rules to follow. And rules that I think Zhuangzi would have just laughed at and made fun of. And this idea of virtue, meaning in a Christian sense and in an Islamic sense of someone that is being so upright and so moral that they become very cold and they're not really connecting with the joy of life in the way that Zhuangzi and Lao Tzu talk about, or the Taoists talk about. To understand how Taoist virtue can be practiced in everyday life, this part's very interesting. We may look at an intriguing historical example, the 7 sages of the bamboo grove, very famous story in ancient Taoism. So this section is called Taoist Virtue versus Confucian Virtue. A useful way to understand Taoist virtue is to contrast it with Confucian virtue, which dominated the moral philosophy of traditional Chinese society, even many years after Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi. As a matter of fact, it was many years after those two that Confucius, who was alive at the same time as Lao Tzu, it became the state, kind of the state religion in a way, Confucianism. Confucianism places great emphasis on ritual propriety, which is called Li, social responsibility, and the cultivation of moral character through disciplined practice. The Confucian gentleman strives to embody virtues such as benevolence, or Ren, righteousness, or Yi, and propriety, Li, in order to maintain social harmony. In Confucian thought, Virtue is closely linked with fulfilling one's social roles, respecting social hierarchies, maintaining order in the family and state, and practicing moral self-discipline. Confucius himself emphasized the importance of proper conduct in everyday life, arguing that social harmony depends upon individuals observing appropriate rituals and responsibilities. Taoism, by contrast, views excessive moralism with suspicion. From a Taoist perspective, rigid moral codes often indicate that society has already lost its natural harmony. The Dao De Jing famously observes, "When the great Tao is abandoned, benevolence and righteousness appear. When wisdom and intelligence arise, great hypocrisy appears." In other words, when natural harmony disappears, societies compensate by imposing moral rules. Taoist virtue, therefore, emphasizes naturalness, that idea of ziren that we've talked about, spontaneity, and authenticity rather than conscious moral performance. Where Confucian virtue seeks to shape behavior through discipline, Taoist virtue seeks to remove artificial constraints so that authentic behavior may rise naturally. So here I'm going to bring up an example that is not usually thought of in a Taoist way at all, but looked at it through a certain lens. The other night we had movie night at my house with my girlfriend and her sister, her identical twin sister. And we watched a movie that I had never seen, but it was a beloved movie from their childhood. And it is called Mary Poppins, which is a very silly movie overall, I thought. But they have, there's two main characters. Two of the main characters in the film are the dad, who is a banker. His last name is even Banks. I don't remember his first name. Who's very strict, very Confucian, very stuffy in a way that only British people can be stuffy, and works in a bank and looks down upon anything that he sees as silly or not important. The other character, the other main character is Bert. Bert is a really interesting character and my favorite character in the whole movie, and I thought the actor who played him did a magnificent job, played by the actor Dick Van Dyke. And Dick Van Dyke is amazing body stuff, just like I kind of compare him to Charlie Chaplin, who did a lot of physical comedy with his body. And Dick Van Dyke also inhabits his body in such an amazing way, even when he's just talking, but especially in some of the dancing things he does. And he is an artist. I think it was the first time we meet him. No, I don't remember the very first time, but one of the next time he's doing street art. Oh, the first time he's busking in the street, and he's a one-man band, and he's connected all these things, all these different drums and everything to his body, and he's singing and he's making up songs in the moment for each person, and so he's passing his hat, which he makes very little money. And the next time we see him, he's a street artist, and he's painted all these beautiful drawings with chalk on the street. And the way the street is, there's some squares, so each square has a different art piece. And there's a very silly thing where Mary Poppins and the kids and him go into one of his paintings, and then it becomes this really kind of silly thing with a lot of Disney animation. But the character is so cool. He's so loose in his body, in his mind. And then there's the last one is when something really difficult has happened. The kids are really lost, and he shows up as a chimney sweeper, totally filthy from head to toe. And they're like, "Oh, it's so sad you have to be a chimney sweeper." And he's saying, "Oh, no, chimney sweeper's a great job," which I wouldn't imagine. But he starts talking about when you go up a chimney and you go up on the roof, you see the whole world in a totally different way. And of course, Mary Poppins and the kids eventually go up on the roof. And it's kind of like a Taoist viewpoint of when you go up away from where the world is kind of this the physical world, the world that everybody's in, the world that some people think where we belong, where we need to work in a bank and be serious. He's like, let's go up on the roof, which many people would never do because they would be too frightened that they would fall off the roof. But instead, he brings them up there and they have this amazing thing. They dance around on the rooftops and they get a view of the world that is totally different from being down here instead of up there. And to me, I didn't notice this at the time. To tell you the truth, I'm just thinking this as I'm saying it. He was the Taoist in the group, and the dad was the Confucian in the group. And the dad brings their kids to work one day at the bank so he can show them how really important the banking thing is. And the really old, kind of decrepit owner of the bank is also played by Dick Van Dyke with a white beard and everything, and he does a fabulous job there also. And Mary Poppins, who's this magical being, she's sort of like a Taoist immortal who arrives on a cloud. You see this in a lot of Taoist books. The Taoist immortal flies away on a crane or a dragon or on a cloud. So she arrives from a cloud. And Julie Andrews was very good, great singer, beautiful woman, and to me was not the most interesting character in the movie. It was really Dick Van Dyke's character, Bert, the chimney sweeper, busker, street artist, and dancer. And there's really a good scene that goes on way too long, but it's all these chimney sweeping doing these amazing dances. So earlier in the film, Mary Poppins is, time to clean up the room, kids. Their room is a total pigsty. And they're like, we don't want to clean up the room. And then she sings a song called Supercalifragilistic. No, she sings a song with a spoonful of sugar. The medicine goes down. Yeah, later on, it's a different time. She teaches them the Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. If you say a louder, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Something about it sounds atrocious, but if you say it loud enough, you'll always sound precocious. And they recite that to their dad, and the dad is having nothing to do with that. That's ridiculous. That's silly. That's stupid. I think this woman is a bad influence on you. So he gets in trouble. He loses his job, and he is summoned one night when the bank is closed. And there's the board of directors, and there's the old guy, and they fire him, and he decides, so what? He decides, I don't quite remember how this happened. Somehow he blurts out Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And they're like, what is the matter with you? What are you talking about? And he starts like giggling and being funny and feeling funny. And then he tells this really silly joke that I think it was Bert came up with this joke earlier in the film that he tells to the kids, which is like, there's a guy with a wooden leg. Oh, can I remember this joke? There's a guy with a wooden leg, and he says, anyway, it's a really silly joke involving a wooden leg. And for some reason, he blurts that out to this group of bankers. And the old guy starts laughing in this really funny way. He's just like, that's the way he laughs because he's so decrepit. And he floats up to the ceiling because there's another scene earlier in the film, which is the guy who can't stop laughing, and when he laughs, he floats up to the ceiling. Anyway, that's a very charming scene, one of my favorites. So then the father like strides out of the bank, and there's something about on the way home he buys his kids a kite, which is to him was the height of foolishness. Who would want to fly a kite? That's a total waste of time in the beginning of the movie. Now he brings home this fabulous kite to his kids, and they go out to fly a kite, and there's a whole song about flying a kite. And he runs into the banker guys there, and they're saying the old head of the bank floated up to the air and died that night, and he feels very bad. And they say, no, actually, it was a perfect way to end his life. I had never seen him be so happy in his life, and we decided we're going to make you a partner in the bank. And then everybody goes off and sings a song, and Mary Poppins, the Taoist immortal, floats off on a cloud. So I'm kind of using that whole movie. What do I tell Shanti about my new understanding of that movie? as the way Taoists look at the world and experience the world. So this story about the 7 sages of the bamboo grove, ancient hippies, and counterculturalists. The 7 sages of the bamboo grove were a group of 3rd century Chinese intellectuals, we could say intellectuals, philosophers really, who lived during the turbulent Wei Jin period after the collapse of the Han Dynasty, which was one of the most popular and successful dynasties, which was about 200 BC to 200 AD, or 200 BCE to 200 CE. Anyway, and he says the group traditionally included, so there's these 7 guys, disillusioned with the corruption and rigid moralism of official society, these men withdrew from political life and gathered in bamboo groves to drink wine, compose poetry, play music, and discuss philosophy. And one of the early things when I first discovered these 7 philosophers of the bamboo, 7 sages of bamboo grove, they actually had some servants going with them to serve them tea and wine, and a couple of them carried shovels in case one of the sages collapsed on the spot and needed to be buried immediately. They were so lighthearted like this. In spirit, they may be described as ancient Chinese counterculturalists, even, quote, ancient hippies. Like many modern countercultural movements, they rejected the original social norms of their time and sought a more authentic way of living. But their rebellion was not merely hedonistic, even though they drank a lot of wine, spouted poetry, wandered around in this bamboo grove, which was like a forest of bamboo, really. It was philosophical. By rejecting social conformity, they attempted to live according to the Taoist ideal of natural authenticity rather than imposed morality. So, engaging with the world. Importantly, the 7 sages were not renunciants in a sense of Buddhist monks or ascetic hermits. They did not reject the world in pursuit of spiritual transcendence. Instead, they embraced life fully, celebrating friendship, music, poetry, wine, and conversation. Their philosophy was profoundly this-worldly. Rather than escaping from life, they sought to experience life more authentically, or we could say more fully, more artfully. This attitude reflects the Taoist acceptance of natural human desires and emotions. Taoism does not advocate the suppression of life, but rather the harmonious flow with life's natural rhythms, what we call the watercourse way. And the last part is the integration of art, life, and philosophy. The 7 sages exemplified a remarkable integration of art, life, and philosophy. For them, philosophy was not an abstract intellectual exercise, but a way of living. Music, poetry, calligraphy, and conversation were not merely leisure activities, they were expressions of Taoist virtue, as opposed to Confucian virtue. The famous philosopher and musician Zhi Gang expressed this spirit when he wrote in his essay on Nourishing Life, Yang Sheng, quote, "Those who pursue reputation injure their spirit. Those who chase fame lose their authenticity." And then art allowed the 7 sages to express their individuality and spontaneity, embodying the Taoist ideal of natural expression rather than socially prescribed behavior. Their gatherings in bamboo groves symbolize a life lived in harmony with nature rather than within the rigid confines of official institutions. So there's a little more that goes with that, but I'm going to share more with you next week, including a section called Crazy Wisdom, the Playful Face of Taoist Virtue. So I'd like to end with a little practice. And this is one that I've shared with some of you before, and I included in my book, Returning to the Source, and it's called Dragon Tiger Breathing Meditation. So it's a way of breathing. Breathing is a way of being. Being involves breathing. Being natural, authentic, Zeren, this sort of Taoist philosophical ideal, is to breathe our way into the world in a way that allows us true freedom in our being. So let's practice that for just a few minutes. So we begin closing our eyes, placing the tip of our tongue on the tip of our mouth, and breathing, instead of breathing into our lower dantian, breathing into our middle dantian. We breathe in, our abdomen, our chest expands, our heart center expands, and we breathe out, our abdomen, our chest, our heart center condenses. So this is a very unique way of breathing. Here's a breathing method that uses the powerful images and energetics of the tiger and the dragon. It is a way to connect with the solid chi of the earth and the graceful chi of the heavens. We really need both in our practice to be balanced and grounded. In this way, we experience ourselves physically, emotional, and energetically in true yin-yang harmony. Yin being the energy of the earth, of water, of darkness, of inward direction, and yang being the energy of the sun, of fire and brightness, and of outward direction. We need both to function at a very high level in our lives. The simple breathing Qigong practice is one way to do just that. So as we begin this practice, or right before we begin this practice, think to yourself, do I need more yang to balance my nature, or do I need more yin? Whatever you decide, and it can change from time to time or from day to day, spend some time just inhaling tiger and exhaling tiger, or inhaling dragon and exhaling dragon. So we sit, paying close attention to the incoming and outgoing movement of our breath. Keep your breath as slow and deep as you can while still breathing comfortably, not forcing, right? Not overdoing, not overextending. As you inhale, breathe in the energy of the tiger as the root of earth. Think of the solidity and strength of the tiger. Remember, in the 5 transformational phases system, the tiger represents the direction of the west, the element gold, the color white, and the lungs are main organs of respiration. It also represents the quality of courage. So we're breathing, as we breathe in, we're breathing in the energy of the tiger, the root of the earth. And then when we exhale, breathe out the energy of the dragon as the root of earth, as well as the openness and fluidity of the dragon. See, the dragon is a green dragon that represents the direction of the east, of sunrise, of new beginnings and possibilities, and of the element wood. Now inhale, think of the strength and solidity of the tiger. Exhale, think of the openness and fluidity of the dragon. So let's just do that for a few minutes. Breathing in tiger, breathing out dragon. take the time to really see yourself as that tiger or dragon. Yes, tigers can be fierce, but here we're connecting to the righteous fiercefulness, the righteous fierceness of being a force for good in the world. And in Asia, dragons are seen as auspicious, not dangerous. Here we can connect with a beautiful, graceful, dancing way to live our lives. As you do the practice, see yourself as both the tiger and dragon, exemplifying the strengths of each one. Picture yourself as a fierce, strong tiger as well as a fluid, beautiful dragon. And then, as I said earlier, if you feel you need more of this earthly yin energy in your body and being, just breathe in tiger and breathe out tiger. And if you feel you need more of that yang, outgoing energy in your life, breathe in dragon and breathe out dragon. So let's just breathe in dragon for 9 breaths and breathe tiger for 9 breaths, dragon for 9 breaths. Breathing in and out. Righteous fierceness. And then breathe in and out 9 times, dragon. See yourself, experience yourself with the qualities, the gracefulness, the soaringness, the power of the dragon. So whenever you feel you want some balance in your life, you can breathe in the tiger, breathe out the dragon, or you can switch it around. Breathe in dragon, breathe out tiger. Or spend some time just with one or the other. It's kind of a very simple, playful, energetic way to help balance your yin and yang energies. So let's bring our palms together, rubbing them briskly together 36 times. And place them over our eyes and breathe in the warmth of our Lao Gong into our eyes. Rub your face up and down a few times. Okay, so that's it for this week. Look forward to seeing you here next week. We'll finish this interesting posting, and I will send you a copy, called Crazy Wisdom, Ancient Hippies, and Taoist Virtue. Okay, see you next time.